Hey, what's up? Today we're going to be replacing the valve cover on a 2007 BMW X5. This is the E70 body style. It's going to be underneath here, so we're going to remove the air cleaner and the covering over the valve cover. And I'm just going to walk you through all the steps. Alright, so the first thing we're going to do is remove the air filter system here. So we're just going to pull off this plastic unit out of the front, and there's two clips down here. We're going to have to pry those up with the trim removal tool. We're going to pry those up and then take this off here, and then we'll get to that, removing that. Okay, so I have a little tool here that kind of helps this. You just kind of pry under these little buttons and pull up that center piece, and once you have that up, you can just pull the whole piece out. There's one on each side, so we can pull out the other side. And pull that one out. And then your air filter should come off and just kind of pulls off the ends here. There are a couple things on the side here that I'm going to need two hands to do this, but just kind of, we're going to pry out here with the screwdriver. You might be able to get that, kind of pry that out, and then we can pull that off. Alright, so I pry those things out and just take that first piece off. The next thing we're going to be doing is removing the air filter unit. So we're going to take off this screw here, and then we'll take the cover off it so we can get down to get the attachments off there. Okay, so there's a sensor on the back here. We're going to disconnect that by pulling that out. And then we're going to take off the top of the air filter. And there's 6 of these clips here, so you just pull each one of those off, and then we'll there's 3 on each side. We'll pull those off. And then we'll pull that off. So the next thing we'll do is we'll just kind of move this wiring. This just slides off. There's 2 of these rails, and you can just pull that off. I just loosened it, and that way you can kind of get underneath here when you want to move that covering out. But we're gonna remove the covering by taking out these 2 things here. This is we're gonna do that with a number 5 metric Allen wrench. And just take both of those off and loosen those up. Okay, so now we've taken those 2 things out, we can just lift up on this whole unit, and we can just slide that out and set that out of the way. So here's our valve cover here that we can replace. Before we go ahead, and there's a bunch of bolts around the edges, but in order to do that, we're going to have to disconnect quite a few things off the top here. We have to do all the 6 ignition coils, and all these electrical connections, and some grounding screws in there, and the Valvetronic sensor there. So we'll have to disconnect each one of those. Alright, so we're going to do the same thing for each of the 6 spark plugs, but we're going to lift up on this part here, and it just it's going a little tough to get up. So you lift this up. This actually just locks the wiring connector in place. After that's up, you can pull that off. Set that out of the way. And then these usually a little bit tough to get out if they haven't been out for a while. The best thing to do is get a good grip on the whole thing, not just this plastic, the whole thing, and do a little bit of a twist on them to get it loose. Twist it back and forth, and then work it out until it comes out. So there's the ignition coil. So we're going to have to do that for all 6 of those and get those off. Okay, so I've removed all of the ignition coils. What I'm going to do now is actually just remove the negative battery cable in the trunk of the car, because I'm going to be playing around with these, disconnecting some electrical connectors here. After we get that disconnected, there's 2 ground screws. There's one here and there's one right there. We're going to take those off so that we can move this all this wiring out of the way. We'll have to remove this connector as well. Alright, so I've disconnected the battery. Now I've got an 8mm socket here, so we can take off both of these grounding wires. One. And we'll disconnect that one, and then we'll do the one in the back. So we got both of the grounding screws off. Now we want to go ahead and take this connector off. We're going to have to pry out these little tabs on the side to get that to release. And once we get that out, this should come up off here. It's a little hard to do this with one hand, so I'm going to use both hands. So pull that tab out, and that connector comes out there. Next thing we're going to do is release the connector on here. There's 2 sides here on this, and I have to pinch those together and wiggle that off. So we've got that connector off. The Valvetronic. And the next thing we're going to do is try to remove this electrical rail, and there's a couple, you can see there's some slides on here, so we're going to lift that whole thing up and get that loose. Okay, so these can be lifted out. We're going to have to take this Valvetronic out next, but there's one of the bolts for that is kind of underneath there, and we can't really get to it without moving this out of the way. So you have to lift up on this, so it's kind of snapped in place on those things. But if you kind of push back on these little tabs and lift that up, you can move that out of the way, and that gives us access to that. So in order to take this out, the first thing we're going to do is take out the 2 bolts here. They should be E10 Torx socket. You're going to need an E10 Torx socket to get both of those out. And then we're going to need the same thing to get this one out underneath here. So just a note on taking out that, this is the bolt that's underneath the Valvetronic, and it was really hard for me to get to it. It's one of those things that it didn't seem like it should be that hard. I could not get the E10 socket on there. I actually had to take a metal file and grind down the outer diameter, because there's a piece of metal just over the top of it when it's installed under the Valvetronic, and you can't get the socket on there straight. It keeps hitting the metal. So I actually had to grind that down to even get that to fit well. That was extremely hard to figure out the right combination to get that on there. I wanted to add one more thing in here. Obviously I've got the engine back together here in this scene, but after you take that connector off before you remove the Valvetronic, you may have to take this, it's like a T25, I believe, Torx bit. There's a hole right in the end of that, and once you take that connector off, and you want to turn it, it's counterclockwise too. If there's any resistance, you'll feel it kind of loosen up when the worm gear disengages. from the gears in here. So you're gonna want to undo that if the Valvetronic doesn't just slide out once you get the bolts out. Okay, now just remove that, and the Valvetronic kind of pops out. As soon as you get that out, there's a spring in there and it kind of pushes that out. So now you can take it and you want to pull it out the rest of the way. And you can see the worm gear on the end of that. So there's the Valvetronic, and you can see there was a little bit of a leak, oil leak on the bottom of that. So the next thing we're going to do is move these electronic rails out of the way on this side and on this side. Alright, so on this electrical connection over here, there's going to be looks like about 6 of these, where it's got a wire that keeps it from coming loose. So you gotta kind of get a screwdriver in there on both sides of that. You have to pry that loose on both sides, and you can see I did that on the first one down in here. I got that first one loose by getting that wire off there. So I'm going to have to do that on each one of these and kind of get that little screwdriver in there and kind of pry that off like I just did there. Just get it off both sides. It's a little bit hard to kind of see in there. Once you if you get a small screwdriver head, you can get it in there. So pry each one of these off, going towards the back, and keep each one of those off, and then we can lift this up. Alright, so I undid each of those. There were 6 of those little spring clip connectors. I had to do each one of those with a real small screwdriver to get that loose. And now I should be able to pull this up. So I can pull the whole rail up. And you want to make sure that when you pull these up, that you reattach them afterwards. They're just, all they do is a retaining clips, but they will spring away and you don't want to lose those. So keep a good grasp on those when you're prying them out. Make sure you're holding the other side of it so you don't lose that. Okay, so I put the spring clip connector retainer back on here so we don't lose that. So I've got this whole thing loose, the one that's on the right side now. And so we can, both of these electrical rails, we need to move those out of the way. So I'm going to fold these over to the left side of the engine, and I might, as you can see, kind of everything gets in the way. So I might just take a zip tie and just hold that whole thing back to keep that out of the way while I'm working on it. The next step is going to be to remove these 2 bolts here. These were the ones that were connected to the grounding wires. There's one there, and there's one back here. That's where the 2 grounding wires were. What you're going to need to take that off is a 10mm deep socket. So if you, I'm going to put that on there and just take my ratchet and take that out. And I'm going to take both of those out, and then we're going to start taking off the valve cover bolts themselves. Okay, so when you get these loose, they come out, and you can just kind of pull the whole thing out, and you'll see that the bolt doesn't come out of this part. It'll stay in there, but it's loose. So this sleeve just fits down in the valve cover, so you can pull the whole thing out. Alright, now the next step is to start taking off these Torx bolts. I've got, this is an E10 socket. So it's a Torx socket, you can see here. It's an E10 size. There are 17 of these bolts to take off around the whole edge of, you can see them, they kind of go right around the edge. There's going to be 17 of those on my valve cover to take off. So I'm going to go work on each one of those. Some of them will have an extension, some I won't. So I meant to say there's actually 19 of those bolts. This is the valve cover overview so you can see where they are. This is the front here, just to give you an idea. If you're just doing the valve cover gasket, you won't have a valve cover. And that'll, so there's 19 of those around the edges, and then there's the 3 that go in the center, or 19 around the edges. And these are the ones in the back, and you won't be able to see these when it's on the car. You kind of have to do this blind. This one's really, these 2 are hard to see here, and this one here you'll have to disconnect that breather hose. And so these 3 are the ones in the back. And you can see I've done the first 2 here. They they'll come loose, and they don't come out. They kind of stay in the valve cover. So, but just make sure that you've got them all the way out loose like that, and then just work your way around and take all of them out. All right. So before you can get the last bolt out in the corner, in the way back here, there's this breather tube that you're gonna have to disconnect because the bolt is underneath it. This is really, you kind of have to climb up on top of the back of the engine here to get it. You're supposed to be able to just pinch in the sides here. See where the little treads are? You're supposed to be able to just pinch that and it expands up. But I kind of had to stick a little screwdriver right under this part here and tug at it. It's kind of difficult to get disconnected, but you can see this is the oil breather tube. So they want you to pinch in there, but see if you can stick a screwdriver under there and under the bottom and get those clips off, because it just hooks over the edge of this here, and you got to get that off. You got the breather tube off, and there's one last bolt I forgot to take out. So before we pry the valve cover off, we got to make sure you got all of them out. There's this last one behind, underneath where the Valvetronic was. There's a 10mm bolt there. So I'm going to take that out with a 10mm socket, and then I'm going to start prying up around the edges of the valve cover. We have to be very gentle so that in case you forgot something, you don't break anything, but it'll be a little bit sticky, but double check all the bolts around the edges. Make sure you got the ones in back. There's 3 kind of hidden ones that you can't see, remember, in the back. There's one on each corner, and there's one right straight in the back that you won't be able to even see those, but make sure you got all those around the edges. And then this one that was hidden under the Valvetronic. Alright, so what I'm going to do is get my trim removal tool, and I get it under the edge here, and I just kind of gently start, careful what you leverage, but it should come up. There'll be a little bit of sticking on the existing gasket. Make sure you don't pry against anything plastic in the engine here, like a connector. It should come up. See, now that just came loose. Now I can, I'll pull up with both hands, and I'm going to work it right around the edges and get that the old gasket off. Okay, the valve cover is all loose. I don't think I have enough clearance to quite get out the back part, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove the cabin filter housing, this piece here, and this metal support is kind of in the way. So there's I think it's a 13mm bolt here, and on the other end of it. Now, so I think if we take that off and the support out, then we'll be able to get some clearance. So the cabin filter cover comes off pretty easily. There's just 13mm, these are just plastic ones. You turn them counterclockwise just to disconnect. So there's 4 of these. There's 3 up here, and one there, one over there, and then the one here in the front. And we take those off, and that thing come right off. Just turn them about a half turn. I got those loose. So I'm just going to take this off now. You can see it just fits around there. We can take this cover off and set that out of the way. Then, like I said, we're going to take this bolt This bolt up here is not a 13 millimeter, so I'm going to check that socket. So this is actually a 15 millimeter nut, so I'm going to take that one off there, and then again another 15 millimeter. I'm just going to use a wrench, an open-end wrench, to get that one out, and then I'll pull that support out. I'm going to can't quite get to this. I can't get to that one with a socket, and the wrench slips off it. So I'm going to remove this. The easiest way to do is to take off this cabin filter piece, and there's these 13 millimeter plastic nuts. There's one there, there's one there, and then there's one in the front there, and then that's just half a turn on those, and that'll come right out. There's a loose, so we can just move this out of the way, and we can just take the cabin filter unit out of the car. Pull that out. Well, there's a sensor on it, so you can disconnect. There's the air sensor on that, so you can either leave it up out of the way or disconnect that sensor. Alright, now that I got the cabin filter out of the way, I disconnected the air sensor, and I'm going to move this plastic piece that's over this metal strut. There's a screw here, and there's one right there, and there, and it looks like about 10 millimeters. I'm going to take that off, and then we should be able to take that metal strut out. Okay, so we got everything loose. So you got that metal bar out of the way. So now it's just a matter of lifting this up. This thing kind of keeps getting in the way, but if you lift and lift this out of the way, and getting enough clearance to get that out over the back there. So this thing seems like it's going to be a problem. That's the only other thing I need to deal with. So I decided to go ahead and take as many of these bolts out as I can, because they are loose, and some of them are either catching on things or they're going to fall in the engine or something. So I'm going to go take each one of those out so that they don't fall in. I can't quite get enough slack on this electrical connector to get clearance. So what I'm going to try to do is right under here, there's like a retainer that's kind of holding it. You can see in there's a little retainer. If we take that out, then I think we'll have just enough clearance to be able to move that electrical bridge up high. Alright, so I pried this metal clip out of the way, and then I was able to move this wiring up here. So now I have a few more inches of slack on that. I'm going to try it again to get that valve cover off. So these spark plug tubes were dropping down and kind of getting caught. So I'm going to remove all 6 of those, because when you're trying to get the valve cover out, they get caught. So take those 6 spark plug tubes out. Okay, it was a little bit of a struggle to get the new one in there. There was a bracket on this one, the new one, that was on kind of on the back side here that was not on the old one. That was kind of hitting things. But you really have to get this out of the way and get situated in there just right. Thing is to double check the gaskets from the spark plugs tubes, and then feel around all the edges. You're going to kind of have to get up on top here and feel around the whole edge to make sure the gasket didn't fall out, and make sure it's seated properly, make sure everything's in place. And then it's just a matter of reversing everything and going back and redoing everything. I made a list of every step, so when I wrote that down, I'm just going to go back through the list now that I've taken everything out. I've got the valve cover on there, and just put it all back together, and that should be it. Okay, so the last part of putting everything together is to recalibrate the Valvetronic unit here. So I've got it connected back up, but before you connect it back up, there's some steps, and you can look at them online as well. But you need to reconnect the battery, and then before you put this plug on, you want to take that same Torx pick that we used earlier, and you want to turn it clockwise to re-engage that screw that was in there, and you'll just turn it slightly. You can feel it re-engage, and once you do that, then you can go through the recalibration steps, which I'll walk you through in the car. Make sure you plug the connector on after you engage that screw. Put the connector on, and we're ready to recalibrate. Okay, so to recalibrate, what we're going to do is turn on the ignition. Don't put your foot on the brake yet. Just turn it on, and you'll hear the car start. What you want to do is if you're outside the car, you can hear the Valvetronic unit engage that, and it's going to find its endpoints on that worm gear. So you're going to do that and hold out, and turn your car back off. Key out. We're going to do it one more time. Put it in. Start the car without putting the ignition on. We'll get it started, and it's going to recalibrate one more time. After that, we can try to start the car. Put it in, put your foot on the brake, and then you can actually start the car and make sure everything's okay with the car. So I was able to recalibrate it without too many problems. The last thing I'm going to do is just put that engine cover back over here, and that's it. I hope that helps everybody.